Howdy, and welcome back. Today I'm going to step away from talking about camera stuff and photography stuff to talk about tech for a minute. I recently replaced the battery in my 15-inch mid-2004 MacBook Pro, and that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about. Though, this isn't a how-to, not in the slightest. I did the work on a relatively short notice and at like 11 o'clock at night, and there was no way I was going to set up cameras and shoot video of it. Doubly so in that it ended up taking me almost 2 hours to get through the job, and I managed to mangle my finger in the process. But I'll come back to that in a bit. Of course, you might be wondering, why did I replace the batteries in my MacBook Pro? Well, the answer to which is both kind of complicated and dead simple. The simple part is that they were bulging and needed to be replaced. The more complicated answer is that, to start with, I'm not really interested in spending upwards of $3,000 on a new laptop right now. Yeah, sure, the new MacBook Pros have newer processors with more cores and can be configured with 32 gigs of RAM, and while an upgrade would be nice, I don't find that my current machine is so far behind the curve that I can't reasonably use it. Secondly, I have a real issue with the butterfly keyboards. I've repeatedly seen informal statistics that really concern me, like Apple Store's employees anonymously reporting that the number of butterfly keyboards they replace exceeds all the other repairs they make on all the other products that Apple sells combined. Or informal Twitter polls that are suggesting maybe 30 to 40% of butterfly keyboards end up having problems. Or the reverse engineering video by iFixit that shows that even with repeated changes Apple's made to the plastics and the keyboards and so on, they have fundamental design aspects that are clearly problem spots. And when push comes to shove, if there's something to stop me cold about this whole thing, it's Apple's design and repair procedures. Replacing the butterfly keyboards requires replacing the entire top plate, including the batteries, touch bar, all of that. And that repair can run upwards of $1,000 out of warranty. Now, given that I've had this MacBook Pro for 6 years, and Apple's warranty only really goes out to 3, that's not a position I'm especially comfortable being in, down the road. Hopefully, in a couple of years, when Apple's new MacBook Pro designs come out, they'll hopefully have a more reliable keyboard and I'll be able to upgrade. And that's really what I was looking for in this fix, to get a couple more years out of a computer that's still perfectly fast enough for the tasks I'm using, without spending a ton of money and time on it. Of course, the second part of the equation is that I've done enough work on computers that I was confident I could do the work here. Sure, the battery's glued in and there's proprietary screws in the chassis, and in an effort to keep owners out, it's still just a computer. And fundamentally that means it's just electronics, and with the right tools and some know-how, it's not impossible to fix, regardless of what many Mac users may think. So that brings me to the battery situation. I went with iFixit's battery replacement kit. I used one of their battery kits before in the past when I replaced the battery in an iPhone 4. And the price of the kit was pretty reasonable. At like $80, I think it came out to a bit over $100 for after shipping and taxes and all that stuff. So, for someone doing it once, that's not that bad. Plus, it came with all the tools and equipment I need to get the job done, including some pretty nice safety glasses, goggles, adhesive remover, and of course the replacement battery. Because the battery in question's nearly a 100 watt-hour rechargeable lithium-ion battery, it can't be shipped by air. However, turnaround time for shipping wasn't that bad, especially not for crossing basically the entire US. iFixit shipped it out on a Thursday. It was delivered on a Monday or Tuesday, though I don't remember exactly which now. As I said earlier, I ended up doing this in the middle of the night. I had intended to do the swap during the day on the following weekend, but when I got the kit, I took the bottom off my laptop just to see what I'd be dealing with, and when I put it back on, it seemed like the bulging was worse. or at least the laptop rocked even more. Now, iFixit's procedure for replacing the battery is kind of a nightmare. If you follow their steps, it's 60 or 50 or 60 step process that requires essentially completely disassembling all of the internals of the laptop. It took me a while to figure out why they had you doing all this, since the battery doesn't actually require the computer to be disassembled that far to take it out, and ultimately comes down to the speakers and the iFixit adhesive remover. The adhesive remover is an acetone-based solvent, and the speakers are plastic. And when the two get together, well, the speakers are dissolved and destroyed. Of course, this would have been a lot easier if Apple hadn't buried the speakers under the main board in such a way that you couldn't get them out without taking everything else out. If there's one thing you quickly get from working on a Mac of any sort, it's that Apple's engineers aren't interested in making anything easy to fix. Apple as a whole seems that they would much rather you throw out an otherwise functional computer and buy a new one than fix somewhat trivial stuff like replacing a battery and continue to use it. And don't get me wrong here. I fully get the need for some of the design choices they make. Like, I'm okay with the batteries being stuck to the chassis, as it makes the computer that much thinner. And, ultimately that was one of the reasons I bought a MacBook Pro instead of a Lenovo or Dell back when I got this machine. However, at the same time, it certainly feels like they could have made some things like the batteries or the speakers to get to to get at the batteries, or in this case, to not dissolve them while removing the batteries, a bit more repairable without quite as much disassembly. Of course, this isn't the whole gotcha either. To get the main board out, you have to remove the airport card, and the connectors for the antennas that are on the card are very small and fragile. In reading through the comments on iFixit's directions, there were numerous people that were complaining about damaging those connections and losing Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, or simply having problems getting their computer to boot after they reassembled all that. Fortunately, someone figured out that the batteries are held in with a thin double-sided foam tape. And like all double-sided foam tapes, you can split the tape by cutting the foam. Thus was born the string method. Now, I didn't make this up. Credit goes to another YouTuber, and I'll link their video in the description. But the short of it is, instead of disassembling the entire computer and then using iFixit's adhesive softener to break down the adhesive tape, you use a string to cut the foam tape under the batteries without removing everything else. Now, that said, this isn't quite as gentle as the solvent method, but I think it's a worthwhile alternative, at least when you weigh the options, especially if you're worried about damaging the connectors on the airport card. That said, there's one potential negative, and it does take a lot, and that's that it does take a lot of force to work the string back and forth under the batteries, and this is where I managed to slightly mangle my finger. On one hand, you want a strong but fine thread. A good option would be something like Sailmaker's thread or a thin Dyneema thread, or even fishing line. Moreover, I would add that something with texture, like a twisted or braided line, is preferable, as that texture will help cut the foam a little better than something that's just smooth. However, you need to wrap it around something other than your finger and secure that to get a good grip as you saw back and forth through the foam tape. Using the string method, assuming you don't mangle your finger like I did, you should probably be able to get through the process of removing the old batteries in maybe 30 minutes, if not less, though it's obviously best not to rush. Ultimately, the reason it took me so long, or almost 2 hours, was that I had to stop and bandage up my finger before I could continue. And then, because of course my finger was all bandaged and whatnot, I couldn't really use my finger the same way, so it was even slower getting through the remaining, I think, 3 or 4 batteries. That said, I have new batteries in now, the computer sits flat like it should, and I have basically full capacity battery. I would point out, though, iFixit batteries aren't Apple OEM parts. The capacities may not be 100% the same. After going through the battery calibration procedure on my machine, Coconut Battery lists my battery as having a capacity of 8587 milliamp hour, while it lists the computer's design capacity as being around 8755 milliamp hour. So my new battery is technically at 98.1% of what the computer originally should have been. This difference doesn't really bother me, though. I've been using the computer on the new battery, and the battery life is functionally identical to what I was getting before. The other day, when I was waiting for some construction work to get done, I got 5 or so hours of YouTube watching in Chrome, which isn't the most battery-friendly browser either, on about 65% of the battery's charge. And I've gone around 10 hours on a charge with mixed writing and web browsing. So, both of those numbers are largely reflective of what I saw in the past. So, with all that said, should you consider replacing the battery in your MacBook Pro yourself? I'm going to give this a hard no. Especially even if you have the skills, the time, the cost-benefit ratio falls in your favor, it is a real pain in the butt. Personally, I don't ever want to do this again, and I'm expecting this new battery will get me through at least another couple of years, and I can upgrade to a new machine before I have to mess with the batteries again. But, again, it's kind of up to you. So, if you found this interesting, please smash the thumbs up button and subscribe. If not, well, you know what to do. For more in-depth written content on photography, travel, and camera gear, please visit my website at www.pointsandfocus.com. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at pointsandfocus. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.